screen with you. Oh, let's just make sure I get the right one. Let's just see if it opens. Can everybody see the screen?
I can.
Yeah. So good morning, everybody. Yes, many of you know that we've been CUBO members for some time, Litmus FM and Litmus Partnership. Been to the exhibitions and worked with the guys before, you guys before. But recently we've created a collaboration with Infogrid. And so we're just going to talk about why we did that and show you some of their services and how we're developing to improve healthier buildings for our clients. So we've been introduced. So Trevor obviously works for Infogrid and looks after the side of the business which we're working with, and I'm one of the partners at Litmus FM. So good morning to you both, from us both. So one thing that's been very clear to us through the difficult time that we've been having, if I dare say the word COVID, which we're all a little bit fed up of by now, I'm pretty sure, is that we've had to, as an organization, when we've been working with clients, there's been a realization that we've always spoke to our clients about what they need, and we've not really, any of us, gone into in depth about what students really need and the employees within your facilities who teach those students. So we've moved away really from trying to solve problems from clients to deliver more positive outcomes for the users, as to say. But it's also been quite a trend in the marketplace, because I'll go through some of the challenges that the marketplace has had recently. But there's been a change in service trend. There's a lot more user-centric approach, a lot more partnering and collaboration, a lot more integration around how these services are delivered to give you better tools. And a lot of that has been delivered by tech trends. So one thing that we've seen in the last 2 years, things that were probably on technical side of the business, which were probably 5 to 10 years out before they came to market, are being rushed in, but rushed in well, that now there is a massive improvement on the trends of tech. So sensor technology has grown tremendously. A need for data and analytical reporting has been very important. And importantly, what that has driven is better use of the assets, better user experience, big drive on energy efficiency across the sites, improved social value, big question on helping ESG and answering that, environmental social governance, and much healthier workplaces. So part of that need from our side at Litmus FM was to find an organization who could help us provide those services to our clients, because we get many clients saying to us now, will you come and have a look at how we can optimize the building better and what kind of technology we can put in to get better real-time reporting about how healthy the building is. Just trying to move on. It's just been a bit slow. Thank you. So one thing that we've seen very much, I've just jumped to screen, I have, sorry. One thing that we've seen very much as a trend in the workplace and the university sector, it's everywhere, wherever there's the building, is that there's been a big move towards that AI and robotics. But the other side is that there's more focus on business productivity or building productivity, reliance and risk. They want to engage more with their students, employees around engagement. ESG is now not just something we have to talk about. There is a lot more move to do things. We're finding that propositions that are coming in, when we do take things to market, there's a lot more performance contracting. So suppliers are now saying, we will do this. We're going to show you ways to do it and give you outcomes from it. So a lot better reporting. And through that, there's more collaboration. And what we needed is the bottom two on the right, was something that will give that digital transformation and reporting to us to be able to go back to our clients and say, this is how your buildings are performing, and proving that then gives you enough ability to go back to your students and even the students you're engaging with to become part of your university, that you have a health and well-being agenda and you can prove it. So that was what was important. There's still a number of trends that are going on, and we still got to overcome them. There's a massive market decline in FM, or has been, with a lot of people have left the industry, which hasn't helped, because they're now all having to recruit. We think as an organization, as consultancy, that we'll get a full rebound by the end of this year. Things are changing. However, that what will be affecting you guys, especially if you've got foreign students coming to study with you, is that it's still a global impact. Is still going on. There's parts of the country like Asia Pac that are still locked down and still rife with COVID. So there's different variances across the globe, which doesn't help. A lot of contracts have been delayed, deferred, cancelled, lots of new builds, capital builds, and so on, building investment being put on the shelf because people don't really know what they need going forward. And that comes on to the next block, which is uncertainty for the estates. What's going on in regards to agile working from home, in students learning from home and not being in the universities, and what is a re-entry strategy to get them actually back in. So there's low occupancy, there's a lot of utilized dead space at the moment that might not have been used, which was absolutely full before the pandemic. There's still lots of sanitation and critical cleaning going on touch points. Some of it's been taken a bit over the top, we all know that, but in the same situation there is a need for it. The other side is that because there's been the decline in FM, there's been a lot of staff move away, and the suppliers have tried to keep the better staff and retrain them. So there's been a cost in employment training of those individuals to move into different sectors. Prime example, the caterers have really suffered. There's hardly been any production of food going on, but their better management, they've wanted them to keep them, so they've ended up doing other things like going across to cleaning or going across to hard services. Supply chain distribution. I mean, unfortunately, the situation in obviously with the war at the moment isn't helping that. We've seen the price of fuel go up again. It's not going to drop at the moment. As supply chain's getting worse, and the rising costs will continue. And if I dare say it, there is still staff shortages because of the market decline and partly because of Brexit. A lot of people left the industry. So there is a lot of talent still needed to come back in. So how are we supporting the clients around some of those challenges? Well, one thing that we're trying to do on the compliance side is get building optimization. So we've been doing a lot of asset register lifecycle work, putting cloud-based asset systems in there, making recommendations on remedial works because capital spend's not as big, and helping clients get compliant again. We're doing a lot of going in and auditing compliance to see how the sites are doing against those legislations that may have been missed because the buildings haven't been occupied. Consultancy is still the same, but importantly, a part of that now is that we're looking at target operating models and how they're delivered to make sure that we get optimum, not just looking after the assets, but supply chain. And part of that vision was to look for better technology and reporting. And that is the main reason we engaged and collaborated with Infogrid, because we wanted to get more smart technology solutions out there to allow services and assets to be more predictive, to get a more proactive role, and to get the buildings in a much healthier place. Challenges, as you know, I don't have to spell this out to you, but part of that is still there. There's still increased competition for international students. I've met in the last 3-4 months, I've met 3 CEOs from universities, some of the largest ones in the UK, and it's still there. Increased competition to get those students. There's still worry about health concerns and for staff and re-entering the buildings. Increased costs with less resource. What do I do about this space and how do I best use it? New building regulations coming in just to top all that. There's some, and Trevor will speak about it, but there's new CO2 monitoring coming in June. ESG, we've touched on, it's time for action very much, and really limited visibility on the health of your estates. Very difficult to quantify how healthy the buildings are. And there's still those compliance concerns. We know that because we're finding them when we do the audits around statutory, Legionella, and backlog maintenance. So again, all those issues that we saw as challenges, we believe that moving with Infogrid could actually help the majority of those to get the buildings into great shape, very safe, and be it proved to students and staff that the building was healthy. So I'll pass over to Trevor, and he'll just talk about how we'll do that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, John. You might as well proceed to the next slide. I think everybody on this call will appreciate, what John's just covered in terms of, costs have increased whilst capacity and resources have been reduced. And really, when you're looking at buildings and gathering data, it's been cost prohibitive and there's been a lot of barriers to entry. That being said, largely it's been perceived as it's been too expensive or too complicated and not scalable enough. So if you'll proceed to the next slide, please, John. At Infogrid, we kind of set out to build a solution that was not only scalable, but affordable and easy to deploy. And it kind of, the solution that we've partnered with Litmus on is largely looking to solve some of these problems, right? Of understanding your buildings better, whether it be through occupancy, through air quality. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail as we go through each nuance kind of use case. But ultimately, you can gather all the data in the world, but it's only as good as right, what action do I take next? So where Infogrid kind of comes in as a solution is not just to kind of empower you to gather data at a macro or micro level across your estates, but also to take action and identify in real time, what actions need to be taken. Next slide, please, John. How this works in reality then, as far as our working relationship with Litmus goes, is we partner with the best kind of IoT suppliers out there, because you've got to recognize that in the space of sensors, hardware, AI, and robots, it's forever evolving at a very rapid rate. So by way of example, this is a very small sensor that's manufactured by Disruptive Technologies. That's indicative of a lot of the sensors that Infogrid deploys. It has a little 3mm strip on the back, so you just peel it and stick it on the wall or wherever you need to kind of take a reading. But the real power of all of this hardware is that it then gives you data and accessible data that you can read and take action against. We've got a number of tools, which I won't go into a great deal of detail about them on this call, but the software as such is designed to create alerts, reports. So John touched on there a couple of key themes, namely the CO2 legislation that's coming in, but also Legionella compliance is still a real and ever-present danger. You would have seen recently, even in Bristol, there was a report in a healthcare centre where it was reported. Identifying that whilst making the best use of your stressed resources early on is of ever increasing importance, and being able to automate that to a certain degree is what we're all about. Next slide, please, John. In terms of software and AI and what you can do, there's obviously a lot of businesses out there on the market that are offering a wide range of solutions, albeit very specific solutions or use cases. Infogrid is designed in such a way that we wanted to provide solutions for both hard and soft FM. And we've kind of now put that into two pillars, which is smart and predictive maintenance, And the other is the ever increasingly popular healthy building system. So as I'll come to talk on in a couple of slides time, that is making a better assessment of what air quality looks like in a given location within your building, or how your building is being used at a macro or micro level. And this helps inform things like, how to clean in a smarter way. And these have the ripple effect or knock-on effect of not only kind of increasing productivity, but also decreasing costs in terms of energy usage, but also making better use of that strained resource or workforce that is being increasingly harder to recruit for. So smart cleaning, by way of example, COVID kind of taught us very early on that buildings weren't being used in the same way as before, and in some instances weren't being used at all. So understanding exactly what the usage of a particular part of the building is then helps inform how you use your cleaning staff or the third party to clean more effectively and in a more efficient way. Next slide, please. But really, healthy buildings is now the new gold standard, as this slide suggests. And by gold standard, what do I mean by that? Well, we're being increasingly being made aware that it's more difficult to kind of demonstrate to not only employees, but also people coming to educational institutions that the area is safe and habitable, and the air is well circulated, and there's certain things that we can offer as a business and through hardware and software to kind of better understand what the air quality in a particular area might be, and we can then index that, so we can give it a score in terms of what looks to be the nominal air quality versus, is there a strong risk of virus? And I'll actually come to talk about that in a couple of slides time. But what I kind of wanted to stress here is that being able to do so is all well and good, but what do you do with all of this data? Well, you take action. So using air quality as an example, if the air quality is poor, this can kind of help inform your HVAC to therefore, pump more oxygen into an area or open some windows or what have you. So our platform essentially is helping our clients and partners to do just that, but also not just on a micro level, but a macro level as well. Next slide, please, John. So I'm going to take you through just very quickly a couple of specific solutions and kind of how the industry, as you well know on this call, how it's kind of dealt with some of these challenges in the past, but how Infogrid and similar like solutions are trying to use automation and technology to do it in a much more efficient way, but also by increasing cost savings and also productivity. So smart cleaning, for example, as I alluded to earlier, is something that's ever increasingly popular. And it's not just because of COVID, but people have understood that actually they don't have a lot of data on how they're currently cleaning to help inform how they could potentially do it better. So by way of example, if you know how a particular room is used, let's say a particular meeting hall or a studio or what have you, you then know, right, do I actually clean it more frequently, or do I actually split it up into several different rooms because there's not a lot of people going in there? So by way of example, historically, how you would do that is you would get feedback panels, or you would conduct surveys, and you would, gather this over a period of time, and then that would help inform your cleaning regime. However, technology's kind of turned that on its head a bit. So by way of example, if you can see me on your screen, this is a little infrared sensor. And if you install this above a door, what it does is it counts the people that are coming and going. And that kind of also comes with a timestamp. That in our system generates a report and essentially tells you, right, there's a particular study hall, it's way undersubscribed, it seats 20 people, but on average there's only ever 4 people in there. Well, that helps you inform your cleaning regime, but it also helps future-proof, right, interior-wise, how do I make better use of the space that is largely massive, but rather underutilized? There's different kind of ROI benefits to solutions like this. So for example, you're using fewer chemicals in the cleaning process if you're not having to clean as often, but also you're not having to illuminate a building at night to clean when no one's around, thus using energy. And this typically we see saving our cleaning partners around 32K a year per 6th-floor building, let's say. Next slide, please, John. In terms of other solutions that we've seen, come in as a consequence of not just COVID, but in terms of, how do I understand my kind of building better and how can I make it more healthier is occupancy. So we have a couple of new sensors that we're utilizing now on the market, which understands people flow, essentially how people are coming and going through buildings. And we utilize similar sensors that I showed you earlier down to a desk level to understand, right, in a lecture theatre, how many people are sitting at which desk. This also helps inform cleaning as well as other kind of solutions. But what it does do is helps you monitor things like air quality. So we can also install air quality monitors to understand, right, in a theatre that's seating hundreds of people, at what time during the day are we seeing, a particular virus risk indicators going off, or is there high humidity in this particular room? What is the air pressure like? That kind of thing, which essentially helps you, generate data and better understand, is your building healthy? Also, you can broadcast this data to people that are on campus or students that are perhaps foreign students that need to be encouraged to kind of return. So this also feeds in nicely to WELL certification. If you're considering a new site or an existing site that you want to be certified, one of our partners, Airthings, which I'll come on to talk to in the next slide, please, John, oh, sorry, it's actually the slide after this, but I'll just go ahead and talk about it. Airthings essentially works with WELL and helps kind of facilitate the whole process. And of course, it's because we have data for the audit trail that helps you do this. What you'll also find with air quality, just if I may dwell on the subject a bit longer, is that there's been numerous studies done in terms of concentration levels and productivity levels increase as your air quality increases. So we are seeing increasingly the use of our open API to help inform HVAC systems and BMS systems in order to automate airflow within a building based on the output of this data. So, historically, John teed it up very well. It's been kind of largely thought to be cost prohibitive to kind of onboard new technologies to help improve all of this. But it seems that all this technology has actually been made available over the last 20 years, but only in recent years has become more scalable and affordable as the hardware side of things have come down. John, if I could go to the previous slide very quickly and just talk about Legionella monitoring. So, and not to come across as as a salesperson or anything, but by and large, this is the most prolifically used solution that InfraGrid provides, and it's probably because it is the most easy to deploy. It is effectively just the little tile sensor I showed you earlier across all of your taps. So if you consider, you've got how many hundreds of taps on any given campus. We save on average about 600 liters of water, let alone all the CO2 that's released into the atmosphere to heat that water by preventing the need to flush these taps. So those little sensors that I alluded to are essentially monitoring every time a tap has been flushed, what temperature it's reached, and that basically helps you not only save water, CO2, but save on money, also save on engineering resource. I mean, you've got engineers walking around buildings, flushing taps and taking readings all day, when really they've probably got more preventative things to do and proactive things to do as well throughout the buildings, like looking after assets and fixing things and what have you. So, this is an area that has really shone, especially as we've all been remote working during COVID and people have had a heck of a time trying to get on site to take readings. Automating this, has demonstrated that technology really does have a role to play in terms of reducing our carbon footprint, but also saving money. Thank you, John. Just to kind of summarize then, in terms of not just the InfraGrid solution, but by utilizing kind of automation and technology, you can really see the benefits in terms of making buildings more healthy, but also driving productivity and getting the most out of your assets. And not to read from the slide too much, but if we kind of reflect on indoor air quality as John has, and as I've just briefly taken you through, instilling confidence as students are returning and employees are returning to site, goes a very long way, and having the data to demonstrate this, especially as legislation is very soon to come into play, is really a no-brainer for a lot of businesses. But it really helps with certification too, because you have that audit trail, you have the data trail. The other kind of aspects around the benefits that you can see, I've mentioned sustainability, but I think a lot of businesses, not just in the educational sector, but in healthcare and even finance, for example, where we work quite prolifically too, everybody's conscious on their impacts on the environment, and being able to demonstrate net zero by a particular date, installing systems like this that are more proactive, that are helping you curb the energy consumption, is not only a cost-saving factor, but it really does improve the overall health and well-being of the building, but also the environment at large. Thanks, John. That's just to final words from me then. As I alluded to there, we don't just work in health and education and finance, but a number of other sectors as well. So these are just some of the kind of benchmarks in terms of savings that we've made or helped businesses make in the past. And just one of the things to call out there in terms of compliance is just in terms of CO2 and compliance. We've helped reduce kind of viruses in buildings by identifying key areas that have had strong at-risk kind of indicators towards viruses, and we do so by pairing with the best technology providers out there in terms of sensor hardware. But it's largely governed by what the WHO tell us and what kind of readings we need to look out for. So I just wanted to kind of share that with you, and in a way of kind of suggesting that it's a constantly evolving situation in terms of the industry and kind of what regulations are coming into play. So, being proactive in the space is only going to be a benefit in the long term. So I just wanted to share that. Back to you, John.
Okay, thank you. I'll stop sharing and come back and see you all if I can. A question that we get asked quite often is, how much does it cost? As you would expect. Just to get an idea, we worked very heavily last year on target operating model and giving them a new solution for University of Arts London, which you all probably know very well. Is 15 colleges across London, including London Fashion. They've now started to ask us, now we've embedded the new service delivery method, on how we could help them around environment. So we've just currently priced up their King's Cross site, which you'll probably know, some of you, is not a small building. It's quite a hefty building, lots of students use. And to price that in, to put the sensor technology in the first place, is around £40,000. So it's not a ridiculous amount of money when you think of the productivity it will save around cleaning, the cost of flushing the taps by the service provider. They're reducing their costs because they don't need to do it no more. And how we work with Infogrid, very importantly, is they implement the sensor technology. They tell us where to put it using their best tech guys. We then monitor it on behalf of the client and report for you. But you do get live daily reporting. You can go on and look at any time how your building is doing, but we will manage that to make recommendations to you, to say, this is what we should be doing with your own in-house solutions around cleaning or maintenance. Now we've got that technology in to improve your efficiency and cost effectiveness of delivering those services. So I hope that helps. So any questions?
Thanks to John and Trevor there. It was a really, really interesting presentation, and it's kind of interesting to see now that the technology is more affordable, how it can kind of develop and help universities kind of make those kind of cost savings and improve the quality of the buildings for the students and staff that are within them. So I'll just open up the floor. If anybody has got any questions, please do feel free to ask. I think everybody's gone silent. So,
Here we go.
Here we go. Ian's put his camera on.
Well, sadly, I missed the first 20 minutes of the presentation.
Oh, Ian,
I got delayed, so it sounds really interesting, but I think I missed a little bit about understanding how the sensors were installed and worked. If nobody else has any questions, I wouldn't mind you just revamping that bit for me.
Trevor, will you do that?
Yeah, sure. I guess, is the question around pipe monitoring, or is it indoor air quality, or is it just generally speaking sensors?
Well, I was interested definitely in the water monitoring and the internal aircon. So, you know.
Yeah. Well, I'll start with pipe monitoring because it's very simple. As I kind of alluded to, I don't know if you were on the call, but this is a little tiny towel sensor. I don't know if you can see it on your screen. And that's essentially one that we use for a number of different solutions, but pipe monitoring is probably the principal use case. This is effectively then just strapped on a little bracket like this. That goes around your pipe. And then our AI magic kind of happens at that point, because what we're doing is we're reading then vibrations and temperature off of the pipe. And that basically gives our platform, and then in turn, Litmus and our clientele, the power to then understand, right, which pipe has failed over the last 24 hours, week, month, whatever your criteria is. It can be completely customizable. But in terms of installation, it is as simple as scanning that little QR code into our web platform, either phone or your desktop, because most little laptops have a camera now. And then actually the one thing that I failed to mention is that it doesn't actually need Wi-Fi. So this is what we call a cloud connector, and it effectively has an electronic SIM in here, and that talks to the mobile phone network. So this little sensor has a 10-15 year battery life, 10 years if you want readings more frequently. But generally the readings are every 30 seconds, and that's communicated to our platform every 5 minutes. So that's kind of all the technical nuance there is, really. With indoor air quality, it's somewhat similar. So the battery lives are somewhat smaller because they take batteries, like traditional AA's and AAA's. But they last about 2 years, even though they're taking very, very frequent readings. Similarly, we've partnered with a different supplier, but with the same deployment methodology in terms of it's communicating to the infragrid cloud via cell phone signals rather than Wi-Fi. And I guess the benefit of that is twofold. It prevents anyone going through the whole InfoSec paperwork that comes as a consequence of dealing with IT teams.
Yeah.
Moreover, it's just, plug sockets are far more prolific than, a little Ethernet kind of port, let's say. But the option to have it hosted on your internal Wi-Fi is always present.
Okay, that's great. That was really quick and good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's really that simple. Yeah, I guess the one thing that we covered, or at least John covered as well, in terms of the benefit for the pipe monitoring is the alerts, so the ability to take action. So I kind of touched on it earlier, but in the platform itself, and this is the real kind of value that a lot of our clients across multiple sectors get, is that they can kind of configure who to notify if something doesn't happen. So John mentioned, catering in HE has had a heck of a time in terms of trying to diversify what they're doing, particularly during the pandemic. And what we've seen is the same can be true of certain other sectors. So we've had cleaners that have been tasked with walking around flushing taps. But now, obviously, that the system that's in place or that has been adapted to kind of do that isn't robust enough to ensure that, there's actual compliance taking place where, because the data is being communicated and you have a platform that's highly configurable, you can be alerted 3 days, 1 week, 1 month. Okay, these are the taps in my multi-story building that haven't been flushed. Send out a text message to this stakeholder and only show them this part of the floor plan where they need to go flush taps. So it's infinitely, without selling it to you, it's just very configurable. And I think, for the purpose of this call, that's what we're discussing, right? It's technology that enables you rather than just data for data's sake.
Yeah.
Go
on, sorry.
I was going to, excuse me a minute, sorry. The battery replacement, I mean, we've got an enormous estate. I mean, I can't begin to describe the size of it, and some other universities have been in a similar position. I mean, how difficult or hard is that to undertake as and when it becomes necessary? I can see, sort of hundreds, if not thousands of man hours trying to do that.
Yeah. The answer is it's not actually that complicated, because the majority, notwithstanding IAQ, which at present is, intensive in terms of that it has AAA batteries and AA's, is that these are generally 10, 15 years. And these sensors are the ones we're using for occupancy, for smart cleaning, for pipe monitoring. So, and given that commercially speaking, our commercials are normally 3 to 5 years, means that as we kind of partner with better hardware manufacturers, we take, and not to get into the weeds here, but we take the cost of the hardware on board, generally speaking. And that means that when it comes to renewals, there's new hardware to deploy. And that's the only time that we've really had to go in and change things. I say we don't really do it because it's so simple. People do it on site. But to your point, in terms of the intensivity of going and changing batteries, within our platform and its subsequent dashboard, you can see the signal strength. You can see the battery on each individual sensor, and there are alerts created as a consequence. So when a battery is no longer communicating, or a sensor is no longer communicating, that then triggers an alert, or you can generate a report, however you want to do it, to go and change batteries. But in the case of the indoor air quality sensors, they don't need to be mounted into the brick and mortar. It's all magnetized. So they'll have a bracket with a 3mm strip that you just stick on a wall. And then you can literally just take it off because it's magnetized, change the batteries, put it back on. So it's not, no one's having to go around with a screwdriver. You just unclip the back of the sensor. There you go.
Yeah, what we're doing, Ian, is trying to build things like that into the PPM schedule. So, because we know the length of time, but because we're monitoring the life of the battery within the sensor, you have the ability to monitor it. So you can say, look, we've got 30 sensors that are very low batteries, so we're going to build it into the PPM schedule that we change those batteries this month, and that's what we're doing.
Okay, I possibly missed it. Is it a initial capital cost and then a license? Is that how it works?
Yes, yes. Yeah. So, like I said, so working on UAL at the moment, there'll be that £40,000 initial outlay, and then it's a far less nominal sum. I can't remember off the top of my head, Trevor. It's about £4,000, £5,000 a year thereafter to have all the software licensing and so on to produce the data.
And relatively easy to pilot, really. It just take a small area, give it a go.
Correct. Absolutely.
If you like it.
Absolutely. You could pick one building, try it out, and that's what UAL are doing. They're getting ready for really the pick King's Cross because it's quite a modern building, but they picked that site because you may be aware they're moving up to Queen Elizabeth Park with fashion, a brand new building. So they want to test it out prior to moving up and putting it all in at the instigation stage right at the start to meet the WEEE regulations more than anything.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's great. Thank you.
Cool. I guess, John, we haven't touched on one thing, but maybe I can put a question to the group, and that is sustainability, electricity monitoring. How important is it to your organizations? Are there metrics in place? How can we help? How can a product or a service help you with data?
I've for a long time wanted to give individual students in residences information about their electricity consumption. But due to the size of our portfolio, the cost of installing other systems that I've looked at has just been prohibitive, really, the benefit relative to the cost. You know, so yes, it would be interesting to kind of be able to monitor individuals' consumption, but it would involve, you know, clearly installing quite a lot of sensors, really. Whether those have to be different sensors from those that measure, I guess, water quality, I guess they would need to be, but, you know, yes, it would be interesting, but we're operating, you know, 5,000 beds that we own and operate ourselves and another 3,500 in partnership. So I'm allocating 9,000 students. So that's the order of the sort of thing. So as I say, and you know, previous monitoring systems, I mean, really interested in the battery life being 10 to 15 years, you know, because that's potentially is a game changer, actually.
Yeah. And what we're seeing is they're ever increasing. So disruptive technology, which is the supply that we use for those tiles that I showed you earlier, they're coming out with their 3rd generation already, which is going to surpass that, to the point where we'll probably get to a point where we're having to replace the cable tie before the.
Sure. Yeah. I appreciate that.
Everything. Yeah. But
so, I mean, it's quite interesting. I think I might actually have a follow up, you know, contact you, drop your note, and I'd be interested to hear a bit more, really.
Especially around the, just especially around the sustainability angle and better understanding the student accommodation aspect too, because we're at, and apologies, John, just to jump in here, but we're in a very early stage of a relationship with, and I'm not sure if we're allowed to say whom, but it begins with a U and it ends with an E. And we're basically looking at all of their student accommodation in terms of electricity monitoring, but also things like just temperature monitoring. So understanding that, you know, when students are away for a weekend or midterm break or what have you, you know, have they left the heating on? How humid is the room? You know, and it's that fine line between GDPR compliance, because it's all anonymized data, and kind of better understanding how we can reduce CO2, but also save money on the heating bills.
No, it's okay. It's interesting. I don't want to monopolize this. I sort of came to it late. I don't know if other people have questions and things.
Yeah, it's more just to instill or to kind of stir up ideas. If anybody's got any, I'm all ears.
It's worth noting, if anybody is going, that we're actually exhibiting at Ord at Birmingham in the next few weeks. So if anybody is going to the Ord conference, we're going to be there with Infogrid on a stand, so you can come and look at the technology, some live reporting going on from some of the sensors. So if you get the chance, but there again, as of course being CUBO members, we're very, very open to have another session one-to-one with anybody and even draw up a plan on a certain building. All we need, Trevor, really, isn't it, is good quality plans of the site, desks, configurations and so on, depending what sensors you want to put in, because of course the sensors have many use. We've talked about occupancy, but we put them under desks now for desk use, so you can book the desk if you're coming in for learning. If you don't use it in 15 minutes, it'll release it and you have to go back on and book it again. So all that is all available. So the sensors are being used for many, many different things. So it's very specific to your needs. So we're quite willing, as we've just done with UAL, to sit down and put a proposition back to you.
Has anybody got any other questions for John and Trevor at all? Okay, we've had a few people just say in the chat, is there any possibility that we'd be able to share the presentation, the actual slides as well? If you're able to share them with me, I'm happy to share with the group that have attended today. Perfect.
You can send them on, not a problem.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. Has anybody else got any questions at all? Everyone's gone a bit shy.
No, I'm fine. I've asked enough, thanks.
Well, thank you so much to John and Trevor for today's session. I think it's proven really interesting in terms of what you're doing, working together, and where things are kind of heading in the sector. Following on from the call from today, what I'll do is I will share the slides once John has sent them over to me, along with a recording from today's session, and when I send the email, I'll put John's contact details if anybody does want to reach out to John in the future to discuss further. And,
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah.
No problem, and I'll end the call there. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.